Hi, so my name is Hannah Foster, and my research project for this 2023 semester was using mathematical language supports to encourage discussion. And this research and study really examined how, in a fourth grade monolingual classroom, language supports can encourage bilingual students to engage in mathematical discussions. The context of the study, I am at Sunshine Elementary School. It is a fourth grade ESL classroom. I I have 17 students, but I mostly worked with a group of 5 for this study, and then looked specifically at 2 focal students, names Lala and In. Lala is a Spanish-speaking bilingual, and her English language proficiency from the Access course was a 4.4, and then In, he is also Spanish-speaking bilingual, and his ELP is a 3.8, also from the Access WIDA scores. My research questions that I focused on during this time focused on teacher and student related. So my teacher question was, how can I, as a teacher researcher, provide English language learners support during constructive collaborative group work for fourth grade graders in mathematics? And then how my students, one was, how do fourth grade English language learners use supports during cooperative group work in mathematics? So I really focused on how I can be providing those supports, and then how students will be using those supports to help them in their math discussions. Before I started this study, I really noticed that there was a lack of discussion in my student teaching classroom, specifically around that creative reasoning that can help a lot of students in that mathematical discussion. And I think that it was important for me to kind of shift just their basic "I got this" answer into more of that creative reasoning of, well, how did you get that answer? So I focus on that creative reasoning. I also wanted to focus on that equity and discussion. So a lot of my students, because they are ELs, sometimes don't feel that confidence that they might have felt just by sitting there quietly. They might not feel as confident as their other peers. So it was very important for me to make sure that I find that equity, so that students aren't saying that they just can't do it, that they are working hard together to get that discussion collaborative and constructive. And then obviously I focused on that student discourse. That discussion in mathematics can be extremely beneficial for ELL students, and also just in general, it can be really beneficial. So it was important for me to focus on that discourse. So in all, that creative reasoning, that equity and discussion, and that student discourse were important for me to focus on as I moved forward with this study. This was my data collection timeline. I had 9 total days. My first week was April 3rd to the 6th. I collected lesson plans every single day through that entire 9-day study. I audio recorded for 5 of those days. Unfortunately, I was not able to video record, but the audio recordings did just fine. I collected student work for 4 of those days, and that really consisted of those exit tickets that I was giving students. And then I journaled every day. I thought it was important for me to be journaling every day, just so that I was able to look back at what I thought and determine what really was and was not working for my students. So by getting all of that data collection, I was able to move forward with my learning and the study, and get the necessary information. These are the analysis tools that I used for analyzing. So while I was journaling, I analyzed some codes for those audio recordings of that discourse. I used coding sheets, and then I also have some transcripts from that. And then with those lesson plans and that student work, I also have some codes. Through those codes, then, if we move over here, I have TMEI, so that's for that teacher modeling, and then direct explicit instruction, whether that be on the math concepts itself or of the discussion prompts that I was giving to the students. So that's just a definition and a couple examples of how that would be coded. I also have LS for language support, and that's where the students were using those language supports that are provided. So those sentence starters, those visuals, those manipulatives that were given to them. OFTC, or an off-topic conversation, talking about anything other than the topic that's being currently discussed, that should be currently discussed. So that would be anything like weekend plans or pets. I had one student talking about her father on a motorcycle. Just things like that would be off-topic conversation that should be notified, should be made known. VP for verbal participation, and that would be contributing to the topics, just kind of all in all talking and discussing what the questions are and what they are should be solving during this small group time. And then RSW would be a role switch, and that would be where one of the students who may not have participated as often starts contributed to a discussion-based question, and that's kind of noticing that they are starting to use those given language supports in their small groups. So I took these analysis tools, and I moved forward with those. These are just the curriculum and the resources that I used for the study. Over here, this Let's Talk Math is how is just one of the language supports that I gave to students. They were able to look at these while they were in their small groups, and that was extremely beneficial for them. They made known which ones was the explain, agree, disagree, clarify, and extend. So there were 5 different ways that they could be using these sentence starters and supports. And at the moment in the curriculum, they do Eureka squared. During this time of the study, we were doing adding and subtracted fractions, which in the Eureka squared curriculum, that is module 4, topic D. We also did a couple days where we did here's the answer, what's the equation? So I would give them a fraction, whether that could be really anything, 4/5, and then you tell me what the equation could be. So that could be 1/5 5 times, that could be 2/5 plus 3/5, whatever, 4/5 math. And then they also could have used those accountable talk strategies in their small groups, especially with the here, this is the answer, what's the equation. There are multiple ways to get to an answer. So that was a really good way for them to use the explain or the clarification or the extension accountable talk strategies. And they were encouraged to make known which strategies they used the most. So one of the findings that I found from my study is that when I am explicitly modeling accountable talk strategies, the students use the supports. So right here is a coding sheet. Both of these are from April 13th. This is from minute 3 all the way to minute 6. You see here that I am modeling that use of the language support. And then if you move over here to the transcript, one of my students, JJ, I agree with Ms. Foster. And then I'm telling them to look back at the sheet. Just because you agree does not mean that that's where you should stop. I agree with Ms. Foster because, and then add on why do you agree? Not just I agree because you were right. But here Lala goes, I agree with Miss Foster because 1 times 6 is 6. And then I kind of work to encourage more students to use those strategies through my explanation. So then here I'll write can you explain how you did that strategy? So that goes back to this, can you explain, can you clarify? I would like to add on. And then in just talks about, I know 1/3, he goes into his whole explanation. And In is a very quiet student. He's a very smart student, but has a little bit of trouble kind of jumping in and feeling when he should start talking. So this was a great way for him to see how he could add in his own discussion using these accountable talk strategies. And then down here, this is from minute 22 to 25. I am again modeling how you do it. And then this is from minute 22:40. JJ says, do you want us to explain how you got that? And instead of me saying, yes, can you explain how you got that? Then In kind of takes that role switching support. This is the first time he himself used it. And he says, can you explain how you got that? So instead of taking a backseat to this, he kind of jumped in, noticed that he could use one of those accountable talk strategies and use it himself. So that was a good moment for that role switching for In there. And then another finding is that ELL students participate in small group discussions when the supports are provided. So they are able to participate when those supports are given to them, and that is those accountable talk strategies. So on April 13th, this is minute 13 all the way to 17, and that is this transcript over here. There were multiple language supports that were being used. So starting at minute 13:29, Lala is explaining, and I then would say, hey, I would like to add on to Lala because I know that 4-6 can be simplified. And then JJ says, I would like to add on to Miss Foster's. And then we got R, who then says, can you explain how? And then I take that, can you explain how you do that? Excuse me. So this was a great way for them to really use all of these strategies. There were multiple strategies that were being used at this point. And then there is some explanations. After that, Lala then says, I agree with Miss Foster because if you were doing this, then this. And that kind of then added on to this whole discussion in our small group math. And then if you look down here at April 5th, this is from minute 8 to minute 15, there were multiple language supports being used. This teacher modeling and explicit instruction is really for me explaining how number lines are working. That was a part in our problem set for Eureka Squared, where students were having a hard time with those number lines. So that was a lot of me explaining. If you jump down here to minute 9, R says, all right, can you explain how you did that? Lala then gets to talk. And then B says, I don't get anything. Yeah, that part's confusing. And then I, as a teacher, say, so use one. You have these supports, let's use one. And Lala then is able to see that. Can you please explain how you got that again? And then if you move over here to minute 14, R says the solution doesn't make sense because, and that's another way that she is using those accountable talk strategies to ask for help and to discuss and get the much needed support in these findings. All right, so that was my study. There were a couple implications. There was a competition to see how my whole class was participating in this study, but I specifically looked at just those 5 students and then those 2 smaller groups of students. So students might have participated because I was in the room and I was giving them a little more support, and so they might have participated because I was in the room or because of the competition. They might have wanted to win. And so if we pulled out of that competition, would the students still use the supports? And that obviously is a question that I would love to really be able to find out the answer for. Also, my conclusions, when ELL students are given the supports, they participate. And then when I am giving students the supports to participate, I can hear their thoughts and know where I can support their understandings. Sometimes our discussions, like I have said previously, they can be very straightforward, I got the same answer, or yeah, that's what I got. But giving them the supports, I can hear more of where their understanding might be misconstrued, or how I can then help support them to get to the right understanding. So giving these students the supports can help me even more understand what their thinking is when they are solving these math problems, especially with adding and subtracting fractions and adding in the borrowing with the mixed fractions. It can be extremely difficult. So hearing those thoughts and understandings can really help me help them with my instruction. For some future direction, I think it would be very interesting to take some time to look at this in a whole class setting. We worked so much about this. We worked 9 days in small groups. So I'd be very interested to see how those ELL students transfer their learning into a whole group setting and see if that changes any of the findings that I was able to figure out. So thank you for listening, and thank you very much.